Yeah, this afternoon it is my very great pleasure to welcome the godfather of glam rock. He's sold more records than you can shake a reasonably sized stick at, and he's done more for Christmas than anyone since Charles Dickens.
Very true.
And most importantly, he's also the voice that you hear in the lifts at the Warsall's New Art Gallery. It is, of course, with a resume like that, it's only can be one man. It's the one and only Mr. Noddy Holder. Good afternoon, Noddy.
Good afternoon to you too. Good to be on the radio with you.
Wonderful. It's wonderful to hear your dulcet tones, sir. Now, you're off, you're on tour in May, aren't you?
I'm going out on a tour with Mark Radcliffe. It's a conversation tour. It's a talk tour. We're doing a load of days, and then hopefully if we enjoy it and it goes well, we're going to do a more extensive tour in the autumn.
Right.
And it was Mark Radcliffe's idea, actually. He's been badgering me for a couple of years now to go out and do a talk tour, because I did 8 years with him on radio, and on his show.
Yeah.
And I've known him for about 25 years.
Yeah.
And when we go out to the pub or when we go out for a meal, I'm always telling him stories, and he's telling me stories. And he keeps saying, "Why don't you go out and do a tour telling people all these stories?" Because he keeps saying, I've not heard that one before, or I've not heard that one before.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "Well, I don't think people would be that bothered." He said, "Oh, well, I would. They'd love to hear some of this stuff." So in the end, he talked me into it, and this year is my 50th year professionally in showbiz, and it's my 60th year from when I first got up on stage singing in the working men's clubs around Walsall and Dudley and all round there.
Yeah.
So I thought this would be a good year to do it. So he's talked me into it, and he's going to be sort of guiding the show. He's going to interview me about my life in the first half of the show, and in the second half of the show, we're taking our life in our hands. We're going to throw it out to the audience to ask us questions. So we'll see what comes of that every night. And hopefully the show's going to... Well, the show will be different, totally different every night, hopefully. It'll go off in all sorts of directions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I suppose, you've been involved in the music business, as you say, for 50 years professionally.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of changes in that 50 years, haven't you?
Not only in myself.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because it does say it says on your press release.
Yeah.
I was interested to see that it calls you Thinking Grandmother's Crumpet.
Well, that's Mark Radcliffe. he loves playing on my age.
The tinker.
So I suppose I am the thinking grandmother's crumpet.
Oh, well, there you go. But so during that 50 years, as I say, you've seen a lot of changes in the music business.
Well, the difference now these days is you can obviously become a pop star or whatever through the internet and through instant television fame on X Factor if you actually get onto the final section of that.
Yeah.
There were always those sort of shows around when we started, Opportunity Knocks, New Faces, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But now the media is so instant and so fast, it's a totally different ball game to when we started out. When we started out, you had to go out on the road, you had to tour to make a living, and hopefully somebody would spot you. You'd get a record deal. Mind you, getting a record deal in those days didn't mean a proper deal. Our first real deal, proper record deal that we had, was a 5-year deal, and that meant we were guaranteed to make 5 albums.
Yes.
These days you don't get that. You could be kicked out after 1 year on an options deal.
Yeah.
And that's even the biggest artists. That's not just the people starting out. So it's a very different ball game. But as I say, now you can get instant success via the internet, putting your music on the internet, and hopefully somebody spots you that way.
Yeah. And of course, it did give you the opportunity, working that way, for Slade to develop and to grow its style and
Oh yeah.
And that's when Slade really hit the big time, it was a very different band, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We built up a massive following in the 5 years we were together before we ever had any record success. We built a huge live following all over the country. And our music had changed. We developed. Basically, when we met became our manager and producer, Chas Chandler, who he discovered and produced and managed Jimi Hendrix, and he was in the Animals as the bass player himself. He saw us as we were all things. We hadn't got our own identity. We'd got our own sound, but we were playing R&B, we were playing Motown, we were playing ballads, we were playing Frank Zappa songs, we were playing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And he said, people won't be able to relate to you unless you've got a direction, mainly within songwriting more than anything else. So he guided us to start writing our own songs. We managed to start capturing our live sound on record. Really, it went for there, but it was a long process. It didn't happen overnight. We were with him for, Lordy, 18 months, 2 years before we ever started to see any sniff of the charts.
Yeah.
But in that time, it gave us a chance to develop. We developed our writing, we developed our recorded sound, we developed our live sound, and eventually when we did get the breakthrough in the chart with Get Down and Get With It, which wasn't our own song, it was our first step on the ladder. It was our foot in the door for television and radio play. And then he convinced us, Chas, to write the next song ourselves, and we came up with 'Cause I Love You, which became our first #1 record. So that gave us incredible confidence that not only could we write a hit record, we could write a #1 record.
Yeah.
And then we were off and running then.
Yeah, and of course, in those days, I mean, can you remember where you were when you first found out that you got a #1 hit?
Well, you get the call. In those days, the chart was at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
The rundown. And we knew we were in the running to go #1 because we knew our previous week's sales. The record had only been out 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we hadn't thought for a minute that the record would be a hit, let alone a #1. Chas was totally convinced. Chas Chandler, he was totally convinced. He told us, you've not only written your first hit, you've written your first #1. He was convinced right from the off when he heard it.
Yeah.
And within 2 weeks, it was selling like hot cakes, and the radio play was phenomenal. And you get the call about 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, telling you where you are in the chart.
Yeah.
And of course, we got the phone call. Each of us got the phone call saying, "You're #1. You're top of the pops." You know, and it's the thing you've been striving for. If you want to be a musician, you've been practicing in front of that mirror for years with your tennis racket, pretending you're a rock and roll star. You always wanted to be top of the hit parade, as it was called in those days.
Yeah.
And when you get there, I mean, it was a fantastic feeling. It was a big turning point for us because the record stayed at #1 for 4 weeks. We were on top of the pops. And in those days, on top of the pops, you were playing to 18 to 20 million people every Thursday night. Yeah. Amazing. And then we just built on that success. As soon as we got the #1, we wanted more and more. And we wanted more hits. And that's the way it went for us. It really did snowball after that. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the success that Slade had, of course, I mean, it must have been a difficult decision to sort of call that a day. Was it an organic process for you, Noddy?
Well, I'd been with the band. We'd had the same lineup at that time for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I'd been in bands previous to that for 5 or 6 years, so I'd had 30 years on the road in rock and roll bands.
Yeah.
And I felt the time was right. I wanted a change of direction. I'd been getting offers to do other things, a bit of acting and presenting work and stuff. Everything I'd had to turn down because of the commitments to the band.
Yeah.
And I didn't drop it on them from a great height. I gave them like 3 years' notice. I said, in 3 years, I'm sort of going to wind things down for myself.
Yeah.
You decide what you want to do from then on, which is what happened. And but basically, I didn't want to be doing album tour every year for the rest of my life. I wanted to see the big wide world out there and what it had got to offer, and that was 20 years ago. And luckily for me, it worked out fine, and I've done a lot of different things in that time.
Absolutely, because of course, I mean, you've done a huge amount of television work and also a lot of radio work. And in addition to things like, and I was intrigued at. Now, tell us a little bit about the Christmas Carol.
Which the one that discussed last year. It's one of those strange things that comes from left field that you get offered.
Yeah.
I get offered a lot of acting sort of roles. A lot of them I don't take up because generally they're consist of me being an aging rock star who commits suicide or falls in a swimming pool.
Right.
And usually those are the ones I turn down now.
Yeah.
But this one came from left field. A couple of guys had written a modernized version of A Christmas Carol,
Yeah.
where Scrooge plays, he's the head of a record company.
Yeah.
And the people he treats are the artists. He treats the artists badly and everything.
Yeah.
And this sort of made my ears prick up, and and when I saw the script, I thought, this is a good new idea. This is a different take on something, and I love that. It's like a red rag to a bull for me. If I see something that has not been done before, and certainly what I've never done before.
Yeah.
And I read the script, and it was a great script. And they said to me, I had to play all the parts in it. It was a one-man narrative.
Yes.
So I had to play all the ghosts, Scrooge, everything. I had to play all the parts myself. And but the narrative was going to be interspersed with an acoustic band, all acoustic instruments, playing Christmas songs. Not all the well-known Christmas songs, but some really off-the-wall Christmas songs, all done by this acoustic band. And they wanted to put the show on at the Union Chapel in London, which is like, it is a big chapel.
Yes.
And all this intrigued me, the whole process of it intrigued me, because it was a challenge of something that I would certainly never done it before, and probably would never have had the idea or the chance to do it.
Yeah.
And so I read through the script, and they said you could do what you like with the narrative if you want to, and I sort of rewrote half of it to fit me, to fit my voices and stuff like that, and talking in the lingo that I would do it in.
Yes.
So I cast like the Ghost of Christmas Past. I cast as a black country punk.
Yes.
You know, so I gave him that voice.
Yeah.
And the Ghost of Christmas Present, I cast as a sort of Gene Simmons figure out of Kiss.
Yes.
An American, over the top rock star.
Yeah.
And so every character got their own thing. And more as I sort of practiced it and got into it, it started to formulate and take shape. And we did the show at the Union Chapel, and it went down absolute storm. It went down really well. And we were hoping to tour it this year, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year because I've got the talk stuff going on.
Right.
Because we're going to probably do some more dates in the autumn after the initial ones we're going to do in May.
Yeah.
And but hopefully, if the producers can get the finance or whatever to put it on, we hopefully might take it around the country next year with any luck. But we'd like to do it in sort of chapel type settings or cathedral type settings. And but it did work. It did work fantastically well, and it was something that totally different. And I love it when somebody comes to me with a totally different thing to do.
Yes.
And it worked. It worked great, and we had a fantastic time doing it.
Yeah. Oh well, that's brilliant. It sounds like you were having a blast with it. And of course, at no stage did it feature the famous Christmas song.
No, it didn't. We didn't. It is the one that we didn't do, but it wasn't through any me stopping them doing it. But they wanted, they wanted it to be the character not associated with Slade, if you like. It wanted it was Scrooge. And it was a Christmas Carol. It was Scrooge, but in this setting of the music business.
Yes. Yeah.
Like a music mogul, but he was the Scrooge character.
Yeah, and do you enjoy, because looking at your career, and certainly looking at it since, post-Slade, if you like, there's been this huge diversity in it. Is that what, does that excite you, Noddy? Is that what it's all about?
It is the thing that excites me, because when you've been in a band for 30 years, and you're doing, you do tend to fall into a pattern of album tour, and I didn't want the rest of my life to be doing that. It wasn't, although it was great while you're doing it, I wasn't getting everything from inside me out that I wanted to.
Yeah.
And so it's, sorry.
That's right.
It's hard to explain,
Yeah.
but you come to a point where it becomes a job. It no longer becomes what you went into a rock and roll band for.
Right.
And you're getting on this merry-go-round, and you're dictated to a lot of the time by what the record company wants you to do, what the record company wants to release. And it was getting more so at the end of the 80s. I was getting more frustrated with the music business because there were like A&R men in record companies who were like just coming out of university at 22, 23 years old, who were telling me what I should be doing in my career that I'd already spent 30 years in the music business doing, and very successfully.
Absolutely.
And it's frustrating for you when you know you have to try and stand up for yourself against these people and say, well, you're wrong. You know, you've not got the experience. You might have a job in a record company, but you've not been through it. You don't know. You're in the learning process. We can't make mistakes on your behalf. You'll have to make your own mistakes with somebody else, but not with us, because we've been around a long time. And I got totally frustrated with the record business as such, and I saw the way it was going as well. It was becoming a corporate animal, which is not why I joined a band. You know, I joined a band to play rock and roll music and go out in the world and have a good time. And it was fast not becoming that anymore, and I didn't want to carry on in the way that the music business was going. It didn't attract me anymore. It didn't attract me at all. And so I went off and did my own thing. And
very successfully too. And of course, as you say, you're on tour now, and you're going to be touring throughout the country. But we're allowing you through Checkpoint Kevin into Redditch on May the 17th.
Do I need a passport to get there still?
That's absolutely the case, I think. Yes, mate. But we'll let you in. Absolutely no problem. We'll look forward to seeing you there, sir. And so you come along to the Midlands.
On the 17th, I think it is of May.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we look forward to welcoming you.
And we do it intimate venues. You see, that's another thing we stipulate. We want to see the whites of their eyes, and we want them to see the whites of our eyes too.
Wonderful.
But we want it to be like as if we were in the pub talking, me and Mark, and they're in on the conversation. That's how we want it to be.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. We look forward to it. We having spent the last 20 or so minutes chatting with you, Noddy. We could go on all afternoon, and it's an absolute pleasure and a delight, sir. We wish you very, very much success with the tour.
Good on you, thank you.
And with anything else that you've got in your quiver that you're gonna be taking on over the next few years, and look forward to welcoming you back to the Midlands soon, mate.
Thank you very much. Take care. Keep on rocking.
Wonderful stuff, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Noddy Holder.